Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time for another edition of Know Your Enemy from Behind the Steel Curtain. I'm BehindTheSteelCurtain.com deputy editor Michael Beck, hanging out with you as always with one Mr. Geoffrey Benedict, our film analyzing guru. Geoffrey, how are you doing tonight, sir?
Doing good, man. Doing good.
Beautiful. And special guest, as always, for Know Your Enemy from the Ravens Wire, Mr. Matthew Stevens. Matthew, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Beautiful. And you know what? There's no better week than Ravens week. I think it's better than Christmas, better than spring break. It's just one of those weeks where if you can't get up for this, if you're part of this rivalry, I don't think you can get up for anything. So I guess my question to you guys first off the top here, I'll start with you, Matthew. How excited are you for this matchup?
Oh, man, I'm so excited. You know, it's every week with Steelers week, it's always going to be good football. You know you're getting a good game. Regardless, win, lose, draw, it's going to be good old school football. And, you know, like you mentioned, if you can't get up for that, man, like, why are you watching football?
Oh, exactly. This is one of those rivalries that you hear people talk about what the Bears and the Packers or the Ravens, or not the Ravens, excuse me, the Niners and the Seahawks or some of these other teams, but I just don't think it holds a candle to that. Geoffrey, is this the greatest rivalry there is in the NFL?
Oh, yeah. Right now, yeah. I mean, since the Ravens actually, were good a few years after they joined the league, it has been. It's been the best for the last 20 years. Like, there's nothing close to it. I mean, I was pumped after the Titans win. We ended up 6-0. And I'm kind of riding adrenaline and just building on that since then. So I'm like incredibly excited for this week.
Right. Now, I should mention AJ in the live chat here said, Mike, 4 years ago, Christmas and Ravens week was the same thing. That's 100% true. So you got me on that one, I guess. So not a holiday this time. Second matchup will be on Thanksgiving. Geoffrey, as you said, Steelers are 6-0. Ravens are 5-1. Of course, you look a year ago, Steelers were 8-8. I believe Baltimore finished the year at 14-2, I want to say. So I guess, Matthew, in this sense, from a Ravens perspective, is there a great and heightened kind of feelings in this game? Do you feel the Steelers and Ravens are playing at the same level?
I do. I mean, I think if anything, actually, the Steelers are playing just a hair above where Baltimore is. I mean, certainly that's the case with a 6-0 record versus a 5-1 record. Both teams have gotten a chance to play against really good AFC teams in terms of the Chiefs for Baltimore and then the Titans here for the Steelers. Obviously, the Steelers won their game. Baltimore didn't. And that, I think, that's the difference. Can Baltimore go ahead and rise up to the challenge here? That we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Right now, Geoffrey, what are your early thoughts on this game?
Oh, my early thoughts on this game are they go straight to statistics. I always like to look at situational football, like through the season, and this is the Ravens coming off a bye week, and the Ravens are 10-2 coming off a bye week under Coach John Harbaugh, 7-1 at home. The only time they've lost with John Harbaugh, their coach, at home, coming out of a bye week, was that awful 2015 team that won 5 wins, and they lost to Jacksonville. So you don't want to catch the Ravens after a bye. You don't want to catch them at home after a bye, and Steelers are walking right into it.
Yeah, we were chatting earlier before we got on here, Geoffrey, and I noted, I believe that was the mustard yellow Ravens pants that one super random year. It seemed like everything just kind of went the opposite way for the Ravens in the past 15 years, kind of one of those weird off years. Obviously, the Steelers kind of fell into that a year ago. But Matthew, my question to you is, what do you typically see out of this team out of a bye weekend? Are you kind of riding a little higher in this matchup because of that bye week factor?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Baltimore, as Geoffrey pointed out, is fantastic after a bye. Fantastic at home, and you got both those things going for the first time, here this year. That's great, and Baltimore's going to have fans in the stands for the first time, really, this season, so they're going to be a little bit pumped for it. And, despite being 5-1, Baltimore's had some issues kind of coming into that bye week and into this game. Hopefully that bye week has kind of helped them solve some of those things, get a little bit fresh. Arguably this should be the best version of Baltimore we're going to see this season, realistically.
Right. And you know what? Geoffrey, you did throw out a stat earlier about the Ravens being 7-1 under John Harbaugh at home. Ben Roethlisberger, very interesting stat. After a game where he throws 3 interceptions, I believe the stat was he's 8-4. So I guess what I'm kind of posing to you is something Mike Tomlin brought up in his press conference. I believe it was yesterday. How this team kind of has to grow and learn from those kinds of outings. Is this something you're kind of looking at, like, okay, Ben's got to kind of dial it back to what we saw out of those first 5 games from him, or do you think gunslinging Ben might be back now?
I think it's a really good question, because we saw against the Titans, Tomlin even said, we're taking what the defense gives us. They've been saying that all year. They've been letting defenses dictate which receivers have good games, how much they run the ball. They're just taking what the defense gives them. They've got a lot of versatility. They got a lot of depth, and they're like, hey, you stop what you want to stop, and we'll attack you other places. This is the first game I think we're running into where that's not going to work. Baltimore's defense last year, started the season terrible and then got better as the season went on. This year, it's carrying their team. That defense has really come together, and it's going to be tough. That defense right now is playing better than the Steelers' defense, and we're not going to be able to just take what they give us, because they're not going to give us anything. We're going to have to make some plays. We could see if they can't get the run game going, we're going to have to rely on Ben. Get out there, make plays, throw the ball around. Right
now, Matthew, I'm kind of curious from your perspective. Obviously, the Steelers had a roll with a couple backup quarterbacks in the 2 matchups these 2 teams played a year ago. What do you think having Ben Roethlisberger back in this game specifically? What does it kind of mean for this game, and does it kind of put the Steelers and Ravens at more of a competitive level playing field, I should say?
Certainly. I mean, you guys saw what the Steelers were like with anybody other than Ben Roethlisberger under center last year, and it wasn't very good, let's be honest. He's been in this rivalry for, it feels like 40 years at this point, and he's a part of it. I mean, it's going to be weird kind of not having Terrell Suggs in there and having some of those big names for Baltimore as well, where it's like that's what made this rivalry great. And for what it's worth, Pittsburgh has a bunch of young guys in there that are starting to kind of bring their era of this rivalry in there, and that's kind of exciting in its own way. But yeah, I mean, Ben Roethlisberger is, for a lot of Ravens fans, the Steelers. That's what they've known.
Right now, Matthew, I'll come right back to you on this next question here. The quarterback on the other side, of course, Lamar Jackson, reigning MVP, dual threat quarterback that really kind of took the league by storm a year ago. Is he still playing up to that MVP level, or is something kind of going on where he may have taken a step or 2 back this year?
Well, I think he's not playing at that MVP level. His stats certainly show it. 1,100 passing yards, granted 10 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, but if half the defenders that he threw the ball at were able to catch the football, he would probably have 6-7 interceptions at this point, because he's bouncing them off guys' chests. So. No, he's not playing up to that level, and there's a bunch of different factors for it, but ultimately it relies on, Lamar Jackson just needs to be better, especially down the field and outside the numbers, which are 2 of the areas coming into the season everyone kind of critiqued Baltimore for their weird desire to try and force those things to work. They're not, and you're seeing the end result of it.
Right now, Geoffrey, how can the Steelers defense, like we've talked about it a lot, this defense has kind of built itself to kind of try to stop Lamar Jackson, the Ravens. That kind of seems to be the philosophy. Win the AFC North, get in the playoffs, anything can happen after that. But in order to do that, you got to basically stop Lamar Jackson. Without Devin Bush in this lineup, that's going to be a lot harder. Do you still foresee there going to be some sort of spy in this game, or how does the Steelers defense as a whole stop Lamar Jackson?
Well, we do spy on Lamar, but it doesn't always have to be the fastest player on our team, simply because of what we do with Bud Dupree and TJ Watt against Lamar Jackson, which is just like even against Robert Griffin, they did it. Is they get them straight to the quarterback. We got tore up in week 17 last year by the Ravens with Gus Edwards running straight at where TJ Watt was, while TJ Watt was running in to hit Robert Griffin. So we put them right in there. Those two are athletic enough that if the quarterback keeps it, they know they're gonna have to deal with someone who's just as fast as them and is looking to light them up. But that opens up things for the run game. It will be interesting to see. Lamar's harder to deal with for the Steelers on scrambles than he is on actual designed runs or on the options. So it'll be interesting to see what we do. Losing Devin Bush is really a big deal. You could see it in the film if you know what you're looking for. The responsibilities changed, and a lot of our linebacker packages were a lot more vanilla than they have been. It's just going to be interesting to see. I really don't have a clue of what they're going to do with trying to deal with Lamar in a spy situation, because we just don't have someone to play that role. We just don't have it right now.
Right. And you know what? Baltimore, as we talked about earlier, has had a couple weeks to prepare for not having Devin Bush in this lineup. So they've probably gone back in time, watched Robert Spillane in university and his time in Tennessee. You just know how that team works. And Matthew, I guess my question to you on this would be, how do you kind of expect the Ravens to kind of exploit that hole in the middle for the Steelers?
Well, much like Pittsburgh's done this season, Baltimore's been doing since last season in terms of, pick your poison. Who do you want to go ahead and stop? We're going to do the opposite and just go somewhere else. Now, Baltimore hasn't been as successful with that this year, mainly because, there's really two main guys, and it's Mark Andrews and it's Marquise Brown in the passing game. And then their running back rotation's kind of a bit of a mess considering there's four of them. Five, if you want to include Lamar Jackson for that matter. My guess is, they're going to attack the middle of the field. You've got a linebacker out, unless you're going to commit a safety down there to go ahead and kind of bridge that gap a little bit. Like Geoffrey was saying, I'm going to attack where the weaknesses are if I'm Baltimore, and that's going to be the middle of that defense, the heart of the defense. Whether it's runs right up the middle, let's see if we can't get something going that way, or let's just quick slants right into the middle of the defense and see if either a safety can stop somebody like Marquise Brown, or if they can go ahead and get a guy like, Willie Snead or even Miles Boykin in the middle of the field to just power over a linebacker or two.
Right now, Geoffrey, obviously, when they're looking over the middle, a name like Mark Andrews obviously jumps off the paper. The Steelers this year, I know we've talked a lot about how that could be a big-time tight end or a large wide receiver that could kind of be an issue for the Steelers defense. And that's something that really hasn't quite been as big an issue as we kind of projected and worried about. Where does that stem from? And can that continue against a guy like Mark Andrews?
Well, it's been Terrell Edmonds so far. And I think a big factor with the Ravens, especially for our game here, is there's only Mark Andrews. Like, Nick Boyle is not a receiving tight end. Last year you had Mark Andrews and you had Hayden Hurst, but Hayden Hurst is over there like lighting it up over for the Falcons, and Nick Boyle hasn't been a receiver to fill those shoes. So it's just Mark Andrews. And I think at that point it really is, you can put Terrell Edmonds on Mark Andrews. You can say, hey, you're going to man up here and go. And he's going to do the job. Andrews is going to get some catches, but he's not going to do much if the Steelers just put Terrell Edmonds on him, because that's what Terrell Edmonds does.
Right now, when we look at the Ravens receiving core kind of outside of that, Matthew, not really too many names. If I'm being honest, if I'm looking at one kind of weakness on this offense, it seems like the lack of kind of a big play guy, someone that they can throw the ball to consistently. It seems like it's just not there. Am I wrong in saying that, or is there something that I'm missing along that receiving core?
No, you're certainly not. I mean, this is a team that just added Dez Bryant, 32 years old, hasn't played football in nearly 3 years. That tells you the state. I mean, Dez Bryant might be still really good. He's not prime Dez Bryant. It's not who he is. Marquise Brown has a tendency to kind of disappear in games sometimes. A lot of that's because they don't have really that third option outside of him and Mark Andrews. So no, I mean, they were hoping Miles Boykin was going to step up. Obviously, effectively a clone of Chase Claypool. They ran basically the same numbers in the combine. They're the same height. They were in the same offense. Why one of them's performing and one of them isn't probably has a lot more to do with Baltimore's offense than it does those players. But they were expecting him to step up, and he hasn't so far. And, we're kind of past the point where they're going to be able to add someone this week via trade. But There's a reason why a lot of Ravens fans are kind of itching and expecting a move to happen beyond just adding Des Bryant to the practice squad.
Right, and you know what? That trade deadline is rapidly approaching. I know it doesn't have anything to do with the game itself, but I'll start with Geoffrey on this. Do you expect the Steelers to bring anyone else in? I know there was all that kind of uproar last night on social media with Cam Sutton posting a couple cryptic Instagram posts. Now, that seems to be absolutely nothing more than, I guess you could call a trolling effort on his part. Do you expect this roster to be kind of a lock here for the Steelers as they roll past the trade deadline?
The only way I would see the Steelers making a move is if Robert Spillane's shoulder is a more serious injury, but that I think he even practiced today.
He did, yeah. He wasn't on the report at all.
That's not a thing. I don't expect a trade at all. That's the only reason I would have expected a trade. So I don't expect one.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And Matthew, is the overall sense kind of coming out from Ravensland that the receiver position will kind of be addressed here?
I think that's the hope. And my guess is Baltimore's making some calls around. But, if you're a good enough wide receiver to come in here and be a second or third guy, you're not coming cheap, whether that be draft capital or whether that be straight up cash. Baltimore's really short on cash, and they've made a bunch of moves this offseason and this year trade-wise. So while they're not necessarily bad in draft picks, they don't have as many as they would normally like. So it's just a matter of finding the right bang for the right buck effectively. But my guess is, they're in on something. They're trying to get a deal done. Hopefully it happens, but that seems to be the prognosis here.
Right. Now, kind of transitioning back to this game, I know, Geoffrey, you mentioned earlier that you think the Ravens right now are playing better defense than the Steelers are. But for the argument of this question, I'm kind of hoping for either of you two guys to kind of defend each of your team's defense in saying who has the better defense. And Geoffrey, why would you think the Steelers have a better defense than the Ravens in this one?
Let's start with the edge rushers. Bud Dupree and TJ Watt are the best edge defenders in the NFL. Beyond that, you add in the defensive line, Tyson Alualu, Stephen Tuitt, Cameron Hayward. Those guys are dominant. And that gives you 5 guys right at the front that are just beating the other team's front line. We're seeing 5-man rushes. We're just you blitz one player, you got 5 guys going after their quarterback, and teams are keeping in 6 or 7 guys to block to deal with that. It's incredible. So that's where I would go. And then our safeties, Minkah Fitzpatrick, I know everyone is kind of down on him. The Steelers really hang him out to dry a lot and just say, you know what, you're going to have to do the job of 2 guys so that we can get an extra player in the box and attack. And yeah, he does all right. He's doing okay. I think people forget how bad this defense was the first 2 weeks of 2019. And we're not that bad. We still have Minkah Fitzpatrick. We're still a really good defense. We're just doing it a different way. We're doing it a little different. Terrell Edmonds has really stepped up, is playing better. Our cornerbacks are 4 deep. I don't think any of them are superstars anymore. Hayden was a superstar. He's not anymore. And the other 3 are just solid. So it's good there, but the real strength of this team is those front 5. Those front 5 are just as dominant as can be. And that's why we're seeing Vince Williams put up ridiculous stats, is because no one gets a body on him. You can't afford to. And Vince Williams is just wrecking your plans all day while you're trying to deal with the guys in front of him.
Awesome. Now, Matthew, I want to hear your side. Why do the Ravens have a better defense than the Steelers?
Well, I think Geoffrey was right. A lot of really good options there. Baltimore was just barely behind Pittsburgh in sacks, 22-26. They both have the same number of quarterback hits, 64. And this is a team that just added a Pro Bowl pass rusher in Yannick Ngakoue. Then on top of it, you got Patrick Queen, who has been growing leaps and bounds week by week by week. Then you've got an all-pro secondary just across the board. I mean, you got Marcus Peters playing outstanding football, a little bit gambly, but that's his game. You've got Marlon Humphrey, who plays inside, outside at a Pro Bowl level. You've got Chuck Clark, who is just insanely smart, really underrated across the league and even a little bit here in Baltimore. But very, very smart guy who's getting the job done. And you got Deshaun Elliott as the other safety, who is just a heat-seeking missile. That guy that's going to knock somebody out in a game like this. So you've got a great secondary that has been kind of handicapped by how much they've had to blitz in order to get the level of pressure they've been getting. Now you add another Pro Bowl pass rusher to go along with Calais Campbell. You should have the makings of the best defense in the league, even if you go beyond the fact that they already are number one in points allowed.
Now, I do want to talk about that D-line. We'll get to that in a second, but I'm curious, Matthew, your thoughts on losing both Tony Jefferson and Earl Thomas, both guys, starters from a year ago, no longer on the roster for week 1 this year. Have the Ravens skipped a beat without having those guys in the locker room anymore, or is that, are they kind of a little bit less as stellar as they were from a season ago?
Honestly, I think from a safety play, they're actually better than they were a season ago. I mean, the first few games of last season, this was not a very good defense. I mean, obviously, Marcus Peters got added. That helped. But as much as I like Tony Jefferson, him going down with an injury and Chuck Clark stepping into his place, we saw improved play over the back half of the season. So, this offseason when they went, all right, look, we're going to cut you, Tony. Sorry, man, but you make too much money to be a backup. That was fair. And granted, the decision to cut Earl Thomas kind of came out of nowhere to a certain degree, but at the same time, Deshaun Elliott, who they gambled on being healthy and being able to play at that level, has shown through. And where they were weak last year, safety play-wise, as Steelers fans and certainly Titans fans will remember, is against the run. Those guys, especially Earl Thomas, gave up at times or just got shoved out of the way. If you're Derrick Henry. This year, again, you got Deshaun Elliott, who's not afraid to stick his helmet in somewhere and isn't afraid to go make a play and isn't going to give up on a play. He's still got that kind of like young attitude to him, which is great. And that's kind of what Earl Thomas maybe didn't have. And I think part of the reason why he's no longer on this team. So in a weird way, I expected them to drop off from coverage standpoint, but they've made that up through their cornerbacks so far this season. So yeah, all in all, I think they're actually playing better than they were this time last year.
Right now, Geoffrey, when we get back to that defensive line for the Ravens, Ngakoue, of course, just added. Calais Campbell's been a stud for them. Pierce, of course, one of those run stuffers. I know I believe missed a game before the bye week. Expect to be back this week. I'm fairly certain. And then Judon on the other side. Is this, let's just say we'll take the Steelers defensive line out of the equation. I know this is a tough question, but is this the best defensive line there is in football?
Behind the Steelers, I do think the Steelers are above them. I do, especially if you include Watt and Dupree in the equation. That is a tough one. They're in that discussion. They are. Yeah. They're up there in that discussion. That's a really well rebuilt line, and they use them well. I mean, we've seen here what Chris Wormley has been able to do, which is barely stay on the field. And he was productive for the Ravens last year. They use them well, and they've got better ones now than they did last year. So it's a good group. It really is, and they have linebackers. But Patrick Queen now they actually have lost some linebackers to back them up.
Right now, before we continue on that defensive line, you did, well, I guess it's sticking with the defensive line. You didn't mention Chris Wormley, Geoffrey, and I want to come right back to you on this. Was that just a complete whiff on the Steelers' part? I know he's kind of projected to miss some time with a knee injury and an MRI. Nothing's really been reported on that as of late. Has that just kind of been a waste of a 5th-round pick? I know it was a pick swap essentially, but then Wormley's deal is also expiring at the end of the year. They got Cam Hayward back under contract. Was that just kind of one of the times the Ravens probably just got the step over the Steelers, I guess you could say?
It looks like it may end up that way, just because of him being hurt. But I've not been unimpressed with his play. He just hasn't gotten much time. He's not a pass rusher. He doesn't really bring anything in that regard. And where his strengths appear to be is in like outside zone plays He's really good at moving down. He's good at usually staying in the right spot and keeping his lane integrity. But he's not flashy. He's not going to be a Tyson Alualu. He's probably one of those guys that if the Steelers keep him around, we'll see an improvement next year. But because we run a very different system with our defensive line than the Ravens do. It's a very different ball game coming here and being there.
Matthew, were you surprised when the Steelers made a trade with the Baltimore Ravens?
Yeah, I was. And I think that, maybe goes to Wormley's value here in Baltimore. He was a 3rd-round pick in the 2017 NFL draft. We effectively gave you guys a 7th-round pick and Wormley in exchange for a 5th. So we came nowhere close to replacing his original value, despite the fact that he nearly played like 50% of the snaps last year for us. So, yeah, I mean, whenever you trade a player to a division rival, it kind of says a lot about that player. But, yeah, I mean, it's Baltimore really didn't know, I think, how to use him effectively. They originally started him out kind of like a nose tackle where they maybe were going to try to get some interior pass rush. Clearly that didn't work, so they moved him defensive end. Just, again, didn't really do a whole lot out there for Baltimore, even though he played a good bit in that rotation. They just didn't really know what to kind of do with him. And Pittsburgh, as Geoffrey mentioned, obviously uses their guys dramatically different. And Pittsburgh probably felt that they could get something out of him where Baltimore, he was going to be buried on the depth chart regardless, even if he made this team at all. So I'm shocked, but not terribly shocked they dealt a guy like Wormley.
Right. Now, Matthew, I'm going to come right back to you here. The Ravens obviously acquired 2 former Jacksonville Jaguars for that defensive line. One coming through Minnesota, a quick pit stop, decreased his value somewhat, and then the Ravens got him for cheaper. A little bit interesting path for Ngakoue to get to Baltimore. He did rack up some sacks, but fairly not super impressive in his time in Minnesota. That being said, not many people have been impressive for the Vikings this year. Calais Campbell on the flip side, that's another guy that went for a 5th-round pick who's been absolutely outstanding. Someone who's been a bit of a Steelers killer, I will admit, over the years watching him go up against the Steelers offensive line, Calais Campbell. Personally, someone I'm kind of fearful of in this game. Obviously, we haven't seen Ngakoue play yet, but what do you think the combination of those two, influx into the Baltimore Ravens defensive line, kind of mean to this team and what they're going to bring to this defensive unit moving forward?
I think the trade was huge. I mean, first of all, as you kind of mentioned, they both played, Campbell and Ngakoue played together in Jacksonville, so they've got that familiarity that should allow Ngakoue to kind of get up to speed relatively quickly, everything considered. Even if you just go, look, line up here, you know what to do, go get them. You and Campbell know how to kind of work off each other in that regard. Because I know Jacksonville a lot of the times would put both of them on one side of the line, just you overload an offensive line that way, and you force them to go ahead and make adjustments, which is great if you're Baltimore. Even though he wasn't as productive in Minnesota, I mean, 5 sacks over 6 games is better than anything Baltimore's produced from one player this season. I mean, Calais Campbell's got 4 through 6 games and got 3 of them in all in one game. So, it's Baltimore did a lot to go ahead and revamp their defensive line this offseason from a run stuffing perspective. They certainly needed to. But adding Ngakoue to it adds a whole different level when it comes to this pass rush now, and will allow a very aggressive and very creative defensive coordinator in Don Martindale be even more aggressive and even more creative in how he wants to go ahead and rotate that defensive line, how he wants to blitz, who's blitzing, just a lot of different things. So I think, Campbell and Ngakoue, huge additions this offseason for that team.
All right, we're going to transition over to part 2 for those of you listening on our podcast platform, so you can click over to that. Everyone hanging out on YouTube, just stay put. We will get more of Know Your Enemy with Matthew Stevens from the Ravens Wire on the other side. You are still listening to Know Your Enemy from Behind the Steel Curtain, hanging out with Matthew Stevens again from the Ravens Wire. This is a pretty interesting matchup, Matthew. Do you think this is a potential AFC Championship game in the making?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, at least in all the power rankings, Baltimore and Pittsburgh are right there next to each other. They're certainly going to challenge for the AFC North, and it's going to come down to that last game like it does almost every year. I don't see why not. I think, a lot of people are expecting it. Odds makers and other pundits are expecting both Baltimore and Pittsburgh to kind of go deep in the playoffs.
Right. Now, Geoffrey, on this one here, when you really kind of look at it, a win or a loss doesn't really matter in this. Like, it does matter, but it doesn't in a sense of getting the win back. The next one basically kind of cements the winning team, the second matchup, over the team in the first one. However, do you think if either of this team win both these games, the AFC North is basically wrapped up there and then?
Yeah. Neither the Ravens or Steelers really have the toughest schedules remaining. Like our two toughest games are the Ravens left this week, and then when we face them again, outside of that, I think we're at Buffalo, and that's it. That's what we're talking about. So, yeah, I think these are the games. These are really the games that are going to settle it. And if someone can sweep it, I mean, they've got to be the favorite. Just like we've seen in the past before. If someone can sweep the regular season series, and we face again, it's going to go that same way. So yeah, I think it's a very big matchup. I think these two teams have got to be some of the favorites in the playoffs. Big matchups.
Right now, Matthew, are you kind of feeling the same way here? Is there a universe where, say, Baltimore or Pittsburgh lose both these games and still manage to win the AFC North?
I mean, I suppose so, but it would take a collapse from the other team, obviously. I mean, both these teams are pretty close in record right now. Again, 5-1 for Baltimore, 6-0 for the Steelers. If one team sweeps the other one, you're talking about you effectively need like a game and a half lead over the rest of the division. The Cleveland Browns probably aren't going to do it. The Cincinnati Bengals certainly aren't going to do it. So it's really just the Ravens and Steelers. I mean, and those two games are really going to be the defining moment of this season for both teams.
Right. Now, maybe we can do a little self-scouting here on our own teams. Matthew, I'll start with you on this one. Where can the Steelers attack the Ravens defense? What's that one kind of hole, or potentially that one kind of concept that the Ravens kind of have been susceptible to so far in 2020?
Middle of the field and screens. You can pretty much count that every single year for like the last decade. Despite having really good linebackers, despite having really good safety play, that's kind of an area that they've I don't want to say given up on, but allow things to get completed there and then just try to wrap up afterwards so it doesn't turn into a big play. Eric Ebron certainly should be in the factor there. Juju, a huge factor there as well. So that's the main one. And then screens. Baltimore has never been great against screens. It comes with just being a super aggressive defense. You're going to bite on those every single time and try to go in after the quarterback. Whether the Steelers can pull those off effectively will be interesting, but I fully expect it, man. That's if I'm Pittsburgh, those are the two plays I'm calling over and over and over again.
Well, you know what? Thankfully for the Ravens, the Steelers have been pretty awful in terms of screen game. So that you got that going for you. My mind's already kind of racing on some sort of wide receiver kind of slip screens, but we'll see if that would come to fruition. I don't see it just based on the history of our offense. But Geoffrey, I'm going to ask you the same question. How are the Ravens going to attack the Steelers defense?
The best way to attack us for the Ravens would be to find a number 2 receiver, because one of the best plays against the Steelers is just a simple, wide receiver, middle of the field crossing route with two guys that the Steelers have to cover both of them, and you can really get us on that because we do not like to put a robber in. We don't like to put anyone in robber. We love cover one, but we want to be blitzing. And so that short middle is open, and you put two guys in there. Minka can only take one. He can only help on one, and the other guy is going to be open. That's the two-level concepts that are safety, our deep safety. It just works because we don't sit anyone underneath. Everyone's blitzing. Outside of that, that's a staple. I I don't really know how to attack the defense outside of that. That's where people make plays. It's really simple. We also give up a lot outside to the sidelines. We will let people take those long outside throws all day. We saw how well the Eagles did when Carson Wentz just started nailing those. He was getting blitzed and he started nailing those throws 15 yards down the field all the way to the sideline. That killed us. But the Ravens don't have receivers to make those catches, and Lamar Jackson, that's not the strength of their offense at all. So we can afford to give that up. I really think the Ravens, honestly, like we've talked about before, we're kind of built to beat the Ravens. We really are. Like they kind of just tweaked what they were building to beat the Patriots to beat the Ravens. They were both designed around, can you cover the entire field quick? Can you get from sideline to sideline fast? Steelers build around that, those athletic edges and the way they run their safeties and linebackers. The big threat to me is what can the linebackers do? They weren't tested as that much against Tennessee. What do the Ravens have to test our linebackers with? That's the real question.
Now, Matthew, when you look at the Steelers' kind of skill positions, obviously there's going to be some brutal matchups for guys, particularly if Marlon Humphries just following someone around the field. That's going to be a tough day for anyone. On the flip side of that, do you see one of these? There's kind of like the core four receivers for the Steelers, of course, Eric Ebron and the running backs. Is there one name that you could be like, he's probably going to have an easier day matchup wise, and therefore that's kind of the person I'm kind of most fearful for along that Steelers skill position units?
Man, that's a really interesting one because Pittsburgh just like breeds pass catchers over there. Like which one of the guys is going to do well? My guess is Juju's going to be locked up with Marlon Humphrey. That makes the most sense, that matchup there. So where is Marcus Peters going to go? Deontay Johnson maybe makes sense on a deep side. Chase Claypool will be my guess. How are you going to defend against his size? Baltimore right now is kind of hurting in the slot corner standpoint, so which is where they're going to move Humphrey. So that's going to leave someone on the outside that's just inexperienced, probably. Because at this point they're down like four cornerbacks to injured reserve again. So my guess that's the guy. They're probably going to have to put a safety over top of him just because he's going to be able to beat you deep and he's going to be able to outmuscle you on the short yard throws too.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It seems like Chase Claypool's either drawing the top corner or like no one. It really is like interesting how it goes, like on a week by week kind of game plan style. It is weird, but on the Ravens side of things, Geoffrey, of course, we're going to take Lamar Jackson out of the equation because obviously he's the most dangerous weapon. I'd say he's the most dangerous weapon there is in football. Outside of him, I'm sure you're going to go with Mark Andrews. So if you could be more creative, is there one guy on that side of the ball where you're like, yeah, that guy's going to have a day against us?
I'm going to give you two.
Okay.
They're the two people I talked about before this. I'm really interested to get Matthew's thoughts on them as well. I always look, when people come out of a bye, I always look for rookies to increase their role on a team. We saw that even with Chase Claypool. We were out week 4, week 5, they come back in, and Chase Claypool runs a lot more stuff than he did, before that bye week. And I was looking past week 2, so the last 4 games, the Ravens' number 3 and number 4 receiver are J.K. Dobbins and Devin Duvernay. So those are the guys I'm kind of looking at because we know Marquise Brown a bit. We've got plans. We've dealt with tight ends all year. We can deal with Mark Andrews. But those two guys coming in after having, a bye week, and really haven't stepped up before the bye week. I'm very interested to see how the Ravens will use them. And knowing Harbaugh, he's going to have something new for us. He's going to have something really new that we haven't seen and we're not expecting, using probably those guys. And that's why they worry me. They're the ones that worry me.
Yeah. No, sorry, go ahead, Matthew. I was going to flip that over to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're actually 100% right. I mean, Devin Duvernay has been slowly but surely building his snap share this season, and when he's done so, he's done big things. It's just a matter of time. Ravens fans have been hounding the team. Just put Duvernay in there because nobody beyond Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews is getting it done. And then J.K. Dobbins is, for all intents and purposes, if Baltimore wants to use him this way, he's Ray Rice. Just a matter of going ahead and again using him that way, and with Mark Ingram potentially out with an ankle injury, they've got their perfect excuse to give him a heavy snap load. And if you consider that Ray Rice put up, right around 4 yards a carry against the Steelers over his career, but more importantly, a little over 9 yards a reception against the Steelers, that's a perfect dump off for Lamar Jackson against this heavy blitz.
Yeah, one of those names that I've kind of been thinking about and seen pop up a few times, of course, Mark Ingram. Oftentimes in this kind of matchup, guys just tape up a little extra harder. They get the team doctor to prescribe them a little bit of painkillers, I suppose. Hopefully it doesn't puncture anyone's lung, a la Tyrod Taylor. Sorry about that unnecessary ricochet there, Tyrod, but Mark Andrews, I'm sure he'll probably go in this one. Obviously, he didn't practice again today after a bye week. If you just say he can't go, is this Gus Edwards' time? Is this J.K. Dobbins' time? Who's kind of spearheading that rushing attack, Matthew?
I'd really love to be able to tell you that. The Ravens couldn't tell you that. They haven't been able to do it through 6 games so far. Who's going to get the snap load is a week-by-week question in this town. Really, it should be J.K. Dobbins. He's done better than all the other running backs. He is a more versatile threat across the board. He certainly has the youth going for him and that kind of chip on his shoulder that I don't think anyone else has. But if we go by Baltimore's history, they're going to give those guys an equal snap load and then wonder why one guy does better than the other.
Geoffrey, I do have to ask you this. It is going to be a somewhat of a storyline, basically based on where a lot of Steelers fans wanted this team to go in the draft. So my question to you, J.K. Dobbins or Chase Claypool?
For the season or this game?
All of it. Both.
For all? Okay, yeah, I'll go Chase. I'll keep Chase. I'm sorry, you don't give Ben Roethlisberger a running back. You give him that big, fast wide receiver that's a deep threat because of what he does, how well he does when we have those guys. Back in the day, I used to count it up and show people that if Martavis Bryant, Sammy Coates, Mike Wallace, any of those guys caught a 40-yard pass, the Steelers' offense was incredible in games where they caught a 40-yard pass. We've seen that with Chase Claypool. When he catches those long passes, the Steelers score points. Everything else works better. We saw it last week against the Titans. We couldn't get over 30 points, and the offense kind of started dropping off in the second half. We weren't making those long passes. We weren't being able to get the ball down the field and stretch out the defense. So I'll take Chase Claypool. I do like Dobbins. I don't know if there's really a wrong choice between the two, but I'll keep Claypool.
Now, Matthew, I'm curious to know your thoughts on the Ravens draft class thus far in the season. The Steelers obviously didn't have a ton of picks, but have, from the most part, have been panning out really well on our side of things. I know the Ravens draft was critically acclaimed, I suppose would be a good way to put it. It seemed like everyone loved the Ravens draft after the picks were made. 6 games into the year, is the love still being felt?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously you got Patrick Queen, who is a defensive rookie of the year candidate right now. You've got J.K. Dobbins, though not getting used quite as much as maybe a lot of people want him to, or he should be, that expects to pick up over the next half of the season. Justin Matabuke has been playing well for the limited amount of time that he's been playing. Devin Duvernay has been a threat. Tyree Phillips is a starter on this offensive line, which is impressive. Broderick Washington Jr., your 5th round pick, has been getting some snaps and doing some things. This is a team that has, despite being stacked, they were 14-2 last year. They were the number 1 seed. They've got, out of their 10 picks, probably 7 of them are getting major playing time. That's impressive.
Oh, for sure it is. Now, as we kind of move into this game, Geoffrey, I guess something we kind of noted, Lamar Jackson's worst game as MVP year was by far his game in Pittsburgh. 3 interceptions. I believe it was less than 200 passing yards. He didn't look stellar. Is that the Steelers' defense just kind of being built to try to stop him, or was that just a bum day from Lamar? Is that something that the Steelers can continue to replicate, or was that just a one-off?
I have questions about that. I would love to say that it's the Steelers' defense because we do have a good plan for dealing with Lamar Jackson. But in that game, teams didn't really have the book yet on the Steelers with Minkah Fitzpatrick. John Harbaugh didn't really have time to plan around that defense and really have a counterpunch ready for it. I assume he will. Week 17, if you remember, Gus Edwards ran all over us. He countered TJ Watt coming in to hit Lamar Jackson by running Gus Edwards right to where he had been and being like, you're either going to constantly give up yards to this one run play or you're going to stop hitting Lamar, which, at that point was Robert Griffin. And we were like, yeah, we'll give up the run. You can get 7 yards a carry on this one exact run every single time because we're going to put somebody in Robert Griffin's face. I do expect there to be some answers for the things they couldn't solve last year in the first game with Lamar. So I do like the Steelers playing against Lamar Jackson. I really do, but I'm interested to see what John Harbaugh counters with.
Yeah, no, it is going to be interesting. Now, Matthew, I'm going to ask you the same questions from the Ravens' perspective. Lamar Jackson, obviously not great that first time the Steelers played Lamar, and only time as of yet. Sunday will be the second. Is this going to be? I'm going to tweak it a little bit though. Is this rivalry going to continue to be those like 13 to 14 games, those 3 points or less affairs, or is this kind of the dawn of a new age here for this rivalry and Lamar Jackson being at the helm for the Ravens?
I mean, I think it's a dawn, for the entire league. I mean, you're not seeing a whole lot of those 0-3 games like you were in the 90s and early thousands. Even that game that you're mentioning, last year, week 5, 26-23. This is not a score that you would have expected to have seen a decade or 15 years ago. It would have been far tighter and far smaller scoring. This is a rivalry that I think has changed along with the NFL, but still carries a lot of that old school feel. So to cop out on the answer, it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, no, and that's totally fair. Now, Geoffrey, in terms of how close these teams are, let's just say in a hypothetical universe, they play this exact same game, exact same healthy players 100 times. Is this going to be a 50-50 split, or do you think there's a significant advantage for one side or the other?
I consistently think that the Ravens have a serious advantage coming off the bye week, being at home. Personnel-wise, across the team, I love this matchup. It would be close to 50-50 in normal circumstances, neutral site, no extra prep time for either team. I'd put it close to 50-50. These two teams are really, really interesting matchups. But with the specific week we have right now, I think that bye week in the hands of John Harbaugh is something he is going to make good use of. So I think it is a big advantage.
Now, Matthew, obviously, I think this might be the first time the Ravens have any sort of fans in the building, but it will be limited. If not, it's just been limited a number of times in 2020. Does that affect this matchup whatsoever, or is that something that is kind of a non-factor here?
I hope it does. Baltimore got a chance to get their first game in front of real fans against Philadelphia and proceeded to commit 14 penalties. So I hope the Steelers have a very similar way of viewing it, which is, 4,000 people get them shook. But, it will and it won't. It's not going to be like it's a packed stadium. So, teams maybe are a little bit more used to quiet stadiums now, and there will be some disruption, but it's not going to be rocking like it normally is. And for a veteran quarterback, especially, Ben Roethlisberger shouldn't have any weird snap counts or any weird issues when it comes to that stuff. Your big question is on the rookies and the young guys and maybe what they screw up. But again, one would think that all these guys are prepared for 4,000 fans or so.
Now, Geoffrey, I believe that one Lamar Jackson game, the Steelers against him last year in Week 5, had 5 sacks on Lamar. Is that a number that can be replicated, or is that just kind of as you're saying, making new to the matchup and not really quite knowing what to come in terms of game plan?
I think it's feasible. All they really got to do is keep the running backs in check. Especially if Mark Ingram is out, that's going to be trouble. if they can keep the run game in check, then Lamar's going to have to create. He's going to have to do things. They're going to have to put him in the passing game, and that's when you can get the Ravens. That's what they don't have. As we've been saying, they don't have the greatest receivers. They don't have a lot of depth, and when it comes to offensive weapons, so if you can take away, Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews, yeah, you're going to have him running around trying to buy time. And while that works a lot, it's a little harder in Pittsburgh because we have some really, really athletic edge rushers.
Yeah. Now, Matthew, speaking of those edge rushers, we've seen a ton this year, teams kind of chipping or double teaming TJ Watt, allowing Bud Dupree those one-on-one matchups on the other side. Both those guys, I believe right now, have combined 10.5 sacks between the two. How do you limit these two pass rushers? And is that something you kind of see the Ravens implement the same sort of strategy, that being double teaming or chipping TJ and just letting Bud Dupree in those one-on-one matchups on the other side?
Well, I think it really depends on how you want to attack this Pittsburgh defense as a whole. If you want to get the ball out fast and you don't have guys pressing or your wide receivers able to beat that, yeah, quick slants are the way to go. And you just let those guys come in. They're never going to get to Lamar before he's able to get rid of the ball. If this is a team that still decides they want to go ahead and try to throw it 40 yards down the field on a third of their plays, you're going to need to put extra guys in there. You're going to need to keep tight ends in addition to your tackles and your edge guys there. You're going to have to use running backs to get chips on guys that way. You're going to have to become a lot more conservative in the middle of the field just from an offensive personnel, which means, again, your wide receivers need to be able to beat guys deep. It really all depends on what the wide receivers do this game. Again, if they're able to get out there and get away from press coverage, then great. Or if the Steelers are giving them just a ton of cushion, expecting them to throw deep, then I would expect them to go short all day long, as well as running kind of just right up the gut. Let's see if Pittsburgh can go ahead and really stop them if they're doing a lot of that edge contained stuff against Lamar and trying to get the edge rushers over there. It's going to be interesting, but I think Baltimore is going to let Pittsburgh kind of dictate how they want to get beat.
Yeah. Now, Geoffrey, on the other side of things here, the Ravens have actually been blitzing at a higher percentage than even the Steelers, which is something that kind of caught me off guard. I think that those numbers kind of skewed the last couple of weeks as the Steelers kind of blitzed a little bit less starting in Cleveland. But Ben Roethlisberger has been throwing the ball in less than 2.25 seconds so far this year. How do you see this kind of working out? Is this a quick release party out of Ben to try to nullify this blitz, or do you think the Baltimore Ravens kind of try to do what the Steelers have done the last number of weeks and kind of not blitz as much?
If they're blitzing, I'm really excited and hoping the Steelers bring back shovel passes. They have not been running them. It's a big part of Matt Canada's offense in college. We used to run them with Juju a lot. We used to run a lot of it. I'd love to see that come back where you just take a running back who looks like he's going to be in the block and slide him up the middle and bam, take advantage of that blitz coming through. I think that can keep it in check. I think a lot of the motion we use can help deal with that. I love a good jet sweep against a blitz. I love that. You get outside that blitz and it's over. There's nobody. So I'm interested to see that. I hope they actually run a good, smart, plan against it when it comes, because they are going to blitz. I don't know. They may drop back in the number of blitzes they do, and they're still going to be blitzing more than we've ever seen this season. So I hope the Steelers have a good plan for it.
Okay, as we head to the top of the hour here, we got a couple questions that we do kind of traditionally now on Know Your Enemy. Matthew, I'm going to pose you this. If you could plug one player right off the Steelers roster and put them into the Baltimore Ravens lineup, who's that one player going to be?
I'd say Watt personally. I think that's the guy that, despite you just traded for Ngakoue, despite the fact that you've got Calais Campbell, you've got Matthew Judon, you've got a lot of things on paper that make a lot of sense. TJ Watt's been getting after it. So if you're Baltimore, you need a guy that's going to be able to do that, and certainly having like 5 of them at this point, if they keep everybody in that scenario. This is a team that just got off 6 and 7 sack games. So I would hate to see Baltimore's defense with TJ Watt in addition.
Yeah, you know what? The 2007 New York Giants, basically all they had was 4 amazing pass rushers, and that brought them a Super Bowl. So that I think that goes to show you can plug as many of those pass rushers on your team as you possibly can handle. Geoffrey, same question to you. Who's coming over from the Ravens?
It's easy right now. It's become a very easy question to answer this. I will take Patrick Queen.
Okay. Well, of course, with the injury, that totally makes sense to Devin Bush. Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. I think for me, I would love to say Lamar Jackson. Of course, that makes the most sense. But, Ben wouldn't be happy by that. And he has a lot of play here. Oh, it's tough. I think I might go with Mark Andrews, actually, on this one. I think that would be a really interesting addition if you just say you turn the clock back a couple years in Eric Ebron and just saw what that could do to the Steelers team. That would be fun. Matthew, as we continue along here, could we get a X factor out of you? What's the one player we haven't really talked about that you're thinking this guy could have a big game?
The guy that I think will have a big game, I'm going to say Ngakoue on the defense. I mean, this is a guy who clearly has a chip on his shoulder right now, is clearly fighting for a major $20+ million a year contract. Just got traded for the second time in like 2 months. If he's not angry and willing to show up in this game and able to show up in this game, then I mean that would ding him for me if I'm a GM anywhere else. That's my guess. He's going to get after it in this game. The other side of the ball, I'm going to say Lamar Jackson has the best shot at being that. He also has the biggest shot of being maybe Pittsburgh's biggest X factor too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Geoffrey, posing it to you, what's that one guy?
The X factor for this game, man, I'm going to go Terrell Edmonds. Edmonds. He's going to be in a tough spot, both being able to chase down Lamar and covering Mark Andrews, who is their major weapon. So I think he's going to be my guy.
Yeah, no, and you know what? I think we could really pick Terrell Edmonds basically every week just based on those matchups he's getting dealt, and he's risen to the occasion thus far. It's time to break down a couple score predictions here. Final scores in this game. Matthew, we'll start with you first here. Who's winning this game, and what's the final score?
Man, as much as I don't want to say this, I think it's the Steelers. Ooh. And I think it's 23-20. I think it's one of those games that, like, a last-second field goal, the perfect Ben Roethlisberger fourth quarter march down the field and is able to score because Baltimore's defense is tired. That's my feeling of what's going to happen on that one. But certainly I think a lot of it rides on how good Lamar Jackson is and if he's able to give that defense any rest at all.
Interesting. That one caught me a little off guard. I thought you were going to go Ravens for sure. Geoffrey, who are you leaning in this one?
I know that bye week thing has me really, really wanting to take the Ravens. Like, my head is like, no, you've got to take the Ravens. I can't do it. So I'm going to take the Ravens scoring 20 points, significant for that's Ed Reed's number, and the Steelers are going to drop. I get the number there for you. 26. The best safety that's ever played for the Baltimore Ravens, Rod Woodson.
Geoffrey wanted to say that so bad before we got on air.
That's what I say. And here's my thing. Here's my argument. Are you ready for this? In the first 12 years the Ravens existed, they won 5 playoff games, and Rod Woodson started every single one of them. Ed Reed, I'm just kidding. Obviously, Ed Reed obviously is the best free safety that ever played for them.
Of course. No, I appreciate you breaking the numbers down, man. Everybody forgets Woodson was on the Ravens for a few years.
Yeah, he was outstanding. I mean, he went to that team. I hated that 2000 Baltimore team because I was like, if Rod Woodson was on our team, we'd be playing for the Super Bowl. Like, our quarterback sucks too, and we can run the ball. You know, we just have crappy safeties, and they have Rod Woodson.
Yep.
And then you guys cut him and signed Ed Reed, and Rod went to Oakland and went to the Super Bowl with the freaking Raiders.
Rod Woodson had a Hall of Fame career as a corner, punt returner, and a free safety. He legitimately could have made the Hall of Fame 3 different ways if he stuck to just one of those positions, but he did it 3 different ways, no doubt. For me in this game, this is a really tough one to predict. I'm trying to take a more stats-based approach to this. Lamar Jackson, anytime he loses, it seems to be like dating back to college. It's by about 14 or more points. The Ravens win these close games. And the only way the Steelers are winning is if they're jumping out to some sort of a lead and they completely nullify the Ravens' rushing attack, which is basically the reverse Ravens. When they jump out of quick leads, blow the barn doors off opponents and just run the clock out. So for the Steelers to win this one, and because I've ridden with them so far every single game this year and I've been right, and I feel like I'd be putting a curse on them if I were to go against the Steelers, maybe I'll keep rolling with that and give you a shocking score of 31-17 in the Steelers' favor. That would really be a statement game. That would be I don't think anyone else would predict a score like that, but it seems if the Ravens or Lamar Jackson led team is to lose, it's going to be a score by that sort of margin. So that's kind of why I'm leaning to that sort of score, even though I feel like it's a much closer game on paper than it is. All three of us were on the Steelers, which are a little bit surprising to say the least. Before we get out of here, though, Matthew, if you have anything to plug, any cool stuff coming up over in the Ravens Wire, you can go ahead and share that right now.
Absolutely. Well, you can, again, always find me on the ravenswire.usatoday.com. And you can find me on Twitter at MatthewS_NFL. It's going to be Ravens talk, so I am sorry to all you Steelers fans, but at least I'm not a complete homer. I did predict the Steelers here, so you got that going for you.
Now, before Geoffrey, I turn it over to you. Aaron does put $1 in the tip jar, doesn't leave a question, but we appreciate that, Aaron. Thank you for that. Geoffrey, do you got any fun film rooms coming up, or any of those fun projects coming up before the game here?
Actually, my film room I just finished and submitted before this show is on the run defense and how the Steelers stopped Derrick Henry. It's a good one. The whole team was involved. Every single player was involved in the film room. It's a great one. It was a great defense. It was a great day for run defense. Phenomenal game, and it sets up well for this week when we need to do even more. We'd be just as good as we were last week. We got to do it again.
All right. Make sure to like the show. If you're listening to the podcast platform, make sure to give us those 5 stars. Like the show. Make sure you're reading the content over at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, and make sure you're also listening to our entire family of podcasts from Behind the Steel Curtain. We got a ton of hosts. So if you don't like us, you got a few other voices you can turn to. We like to think of ourselves as the one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. So make sure you're checking out all the great content from Behind the Steel Curtain. So from Matthew, Geoffrey, and myself, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you guys in the next one. It's Ravens week. It doesn't get better than this. You guys have a good night, and we'll catch you on the next episode.